Here we are again. Another week has flown by, Mr. Kaufman. How are you doing this Friday Fun Day?
Oh man, I'm good. I was just telling my wife about that last night. I was like, I cannot believe I haven't even. April's just gone. It's just gone. Like it's already a week before April.
Mayday.
I can't believe it.
Yeah,
It's a shame too. I haven't been outside all that much. I try to spend the weekends outside if I
yeah,
can,
yeah.
but uh, I don't know. Before you know it, it's just gonna be yeah, the old armpit of America. Just rear its ugly head. So
Yes, you better enjoy the outside while you can before you start sweating out of every orifice. That's correct.
that is the truth, man. Yeah, it's a
Yeah, it's all good.
big cloud of sweat and tears is what it is.
Well, I have a big smile on my face today because I am 30 days away from our Alaskan adventure. Talk
Ooh,
about outdoors, getting connected with the outdoors. So it's a little cruise, and then we're doing a tour through Denali and all of that on the backside. So it's going to be a 2 week adventure when it's all said and done. Almost 2 week adventure when it's said and done. So yeah,
yeah,
my wife has started staging the packing. She's got the staging going on with the packing. So
have the filling up the rooms. Yeah,
yes,
I don't know. I've not been to Alaska, so I don't know, but it is on my bucket list, by the way.
for
But
sure. Yes.
I don't know what the weather's like, because people would talk about like British Columbia and how British Columbia is just. I've heard people say it mistakenly say how miserable it is, but it people don't realize it rarely freezes in British Columbia. They got beautiful weather up there. So I'm only saying this because anytime I head west and certainly into the elevations, I hope you're packing some cold weather gear because May is a little bit early yet for Alaska as far as
Yes, even though it's the end of May, it says that we're 50 to 70
oh that's
on the temperature, generally speaking, but can be colder, can be hotter. We're doing this as like our spring group trip, so a couple of the other couples, so two of the other couples that are going have been to Alaska before, and one of them said it was pretty much 50, 70. The other one's 90 degrees when they were there, and it was first week of June. Yeah, first week of
wow,
June. So
it's amazing.
who knows? Who knows what it'll be like? So that means we've got to do all the different levels, brother. All the different levels.
You gotta pack heavy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I know
So
when we went to last time we went to Wyoming, we went to Yellowstone, um, and I was thinking, we went in early June. No. I'm sorry, it was late. It was May. It was right around the same time. And my mom used to live out there, and she told us when said, well, we want to go hit Yellowstone, and she's like, well, I don't even know if it's open yet. I'm like, in May? Like, are you kidding? And sure enough, it had just opened like the like a couple days prior to us getting there. And when we got there, you could see the main road that winds through there. It's like a big figure eight type of. The road is like a figure eight, and you see that where the snowplows just went through, and there were 15-foot walls of snow
oh,
side of it. I mean, I couldn't believe it. But well, anyway, I hope you have a good time. It's definitely one of these days. I'm gonna make it up there. I want to do some hunting up there. Is what I'd really like to do. But yeah,
for sure. Yeah, we're doing a scenic train ride through from Whittier, the port there at Anchorage, all the way to Denali, and it's about 300 miles, give or
yeah,
take. And it says that it's a 10-hour train thing. So I think it stops and you do nature, all that stuff too. So we'll see. We'll see what it looks like. We're gonna get the full immersion to the extent possible on the guided tours and all that. So yeah.
nature. All right. Well, good.
All
Awesome.
right. So getting back to why we're here, right? Talking about real estate for this week on the Creative Real Estate Investing Mastery podcast. See how it just flows out of me nowadays.
The tongue. Yeah.
What is our topic for today, Mr. Kaufman?
All right. So let's paint a little picture here. Um, let's say for one, let's say that you're kind of following our model. You pick a deal up creatively, or you get it financed in some way, but your dispo for your deals is seller finance. Generally speaking, what we're going to do is we're going to either wrap a property up. Oh, there goes my phone. It's dinging. But we're going to wrap a property, or we're going to sell it on seller financing. I'm sorry, via contract for deed. So we're either going to give them legal title, or we're going to sell it on contract for deed. We'll get into that a little bit later. But what happens? Let's say you wake up. It's the first of the month, and you check your bank accounts, making sure that all of your payments are being made. But you notice that there's someone whose payment hasn't quite showed up yet. So you wait a few days. There is usually a grace period in these wraps. You wait a few days, and you notice that payment still hasn't hit. You shoot them a text, see what's going on, and you get crickets.
Hmm.
So it's at that point, I think, that you realize you're probably, you might not get paid that month. So what we're going to talk about today is in those situations, because it does happen. It happens, quite frequently. Um, Maybe not as frequent if you have a really good qualified buyer, but it does happen. And so what we're going to talk about is, first of all, remedies for um, for maybe you don't want to take the house back. I personally would not. I would rather not have the house back, so I'm probably going to work with someone. But we do want to talk about remedies in ways that you can uh, take the property back if you have to, without involving, without getting super legal and all that stuff. But then there's going to be a point where you have to take some legal action. So we're going to talk a little bit about um, some of these processes and how you can take these properties back should you have a buyer that defaults on you.
Well, let's get to it then.
All right. Let me.
Let's do. Okay, so you mentioned we have two strategies for seller finance. We have an end buyer in there with seller finance.
Yep.
So let's talk about the agreement contract for deed uh, scenario first. So you are private lending to that buyer inside the contract, the agreement for deed. So you still have title in your name. When I say your name, your LLC name, the trust, however you have it established, right? And again, we would recommend doing a trust and having your LLC be the beneficiary of the trust. Uh, all of that, especially as buy and hold property. So the agreement for deed is there. Stop payment, right? And remember, this subject to deal, so you still have to make that underlying mortgage payment no matter what, right? You're still obligated to continue to pay that. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So from a strategy is saying, okay, I'm going to contact them and find out what the deal is, right? So that's what I would do first, right? What is the situation? Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Have they fallen on hard times? Sometimes they'll just ghost you, like literally. They will move out of the property, remove your contact from their phone, and you have to go to the property and see if they're still there.
Yeah.
And you just see the U-Haul truck ruts in the front yard from them getting the fuck out of there, right? Fast and in a hurry. And so it's like, what are you going to do then? But before all that happens, right? Hopefully, like you can have a conversation with them about what the situation is and how to remedy that, right? And what would you do? So they say we'll just keep numbers simple. They're supposed to be paying you 1,500 a month. It's cash flowing 500 for you, so you're obligated to pay $1,000 to your sub two, escrow everything all in, right? So what are you going to do? What would be the first thing you do to negotiate with that seller and find out what's going on?
Well, I think the very first thing, and we've kind of experienced this recently, um, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I just think this way. Anytime someone ghosts me, anytime I don't hear either I don't hear back from someone, or somebody's not answering a question I have, or certainly if somebody owes me money and all of a sudden they go dark on me, I immediately, no matter how hard I try, I go to worst case scenario. Immediately, I just go into a totally different space, and it's just that sinking feeling, like you just know. And it could be, shoot, they may have to take grandma to the hospital or something. Who knows? But it doesn't matter when somebody goes dark on you and they stop communicating. It is like it's just the worst feeling ever. And this has happened to us recently, and it's actually kind of applies to this a foreclosure situation. It wasn't on a property. It was a loan that was given. It was collateralized with property, but and this kind of happened to us, so it's kind of fresh in my mind, is why I'm bringing it up right now. But I think the very first thing you have to do before you do anything else is try to establish a line of communications. First things first. That's top of the list, number one, and that might be, even if that means uh, for you confrontational types out there, even if that means extending a hand and just saying, "Hey, I know you haven't paid. If there's something going wrong, I might be able to help out." 'Cause ultimately, we just want to get paid. We don't want these properties. Like, they're not. It's not. That's not the ideal situation. They're there for security, and that's it. If you have to do it. So I think the very first thing on my list would be try your damnedest to establish a good line of communications with them. So, uh, in the if we're talking about agreement for deed, though, this actually doesn't matter either way. Although you do have different remedies on the legal side between agreement for deed and conveying via legal title. But on the agreement for deed side, and it's funny you mentioned the sometimes they'll just leave, they'll just
Yep.
vanish. I recently saw somebody that happened to. I read it in one of the Facebook groups, and I thought that's pretty bold. And I think that probably, I know for a fact in this situation it had to do with, I don't think there was enough pain involved. And what I mean by that is I don't think that this person's buyer actually put enough money down so that was painful enough for them to lose it.
Right.
So
Not to leave. Right. Not to go see. Yeah.
yeah, so I know, a lot of us, we all have, some of us anyway, have big hearts, and we want to make it affordable, and we want to make it all this and that, but it's got to hurt. You got to understand, if they leave, they're not being hurt if they don't have some sort of uh, larger financial interest in the property.
Yep.
So
And can we just stop here and just note for the record too that our rule of thumb is 10%.
yep.
So if we're going to sell a finance, regardless of whether it's a wrap mortgage or a wrap note, right? That's really the term.
The correct term.
Mortgage is only in particular states there, but it's just generically called wrap mortgage. But it's really a wrap note, and it's either a wrap mortgage in a mortgage state, or it's an all-inclusive deed of trust in the trust states, right? So
Right.
people don't like to say that's got too many words.
Right. Yeah.
Right, so we just call it the wrap mortgage. But in either scenario, right? Either scenario, you've got to make sure that you have. See, I already lost my train of thought.
That's okay, because you see, you're doing like I do. So this is now you understand what it's like to be Jeff Kaufman. See, because I told you my scenario. It's like I have a tree and it's growing branches.
It's
but leaves start blossoming in all different areas.
actually what happened, if I'm being honest. So behind me, you can see that I go light and dark.
Yeah.
Well, a bird just flew behind me in the windows, and it distracted me back there. And then I went light and dark, and sorry, I just got completely distracted and lost my train. Hey, I'm doing this from my home office here, right? The office, I call it the office. So there's like all kinds of distractions sometimes to go in there. So I apologize. I apologize for that too. But let's get back to the show.
let's
so we speak to.
let's dig into let's just get into the agreement for deed side. So uh, agreement for deed, bond for deed, contract for deed, it's all basically the same. It means the same thing, and it has the same. Not an attorney here, not an attorney, but it all has the same kind of legal standing. Um, in that, with agreement for deed, if you don't know, agreement for deed, what you're giving your buyer is you're giving them equitable interest. You're not giving them legal title, so they don't have any kind of. They have a legal interest in it as well, in the sense from the courts, but they only have equitable title. They do not have legal title. And so the courts, in this case, in most of these cases, actually, it can go, on rare occasion, it can go further than this, but the courts, generally speaking, are going to, they're going to look at an agreement for deed or a bond for deed as a sort of a rental type scenario. And that's a kind of a bad way to put it, because they still do have equitable interest in it. They are owners. They are equitable owners. But as far as the methods and the ways that the legal system is going to treat that scenario, they're essentially they're living in a property. So kind of break this down. They're living in a property where they have an agreement, and if they meet the terms of that agreement, then they will get the deed. If they break that agreement, they're not getting the deed, but they're still in the property. And so they're kind of I don't know if illegally is the word I'm looking for, but they're kind of just squatting in a property at that point. They become um, sort of squatters. And so the courts are going to look at that as kind of uh,
Eviction.
your normal eviction type process of
Yeah.
getting someone out who doesn't belong, who has no, has broken their agreement, and that's it's going to be the almost the exact same process. In fact, we've done a couple of those. Did one over in Illinois.
Yep.
Um,
Yes, and it was an eviction. So Illinois is an interesting case. They actually have state statute that said when they're 20% paid into the property, in other words, their value or interest is 20% in the property, then it's a foreclosure.
Now, I didn't think they had statute. I thought that was just like a general rule of thumb over there. But
No, I believe it's a statute that they have over there too. And so that's kind of the rule of thumb we use. So if they're given a 10% down payment, right, they're automatically 10% in. So they're saying, okay, well, that may be a reason, going back to where I lost my train of thought, that may be a reason to have 5% down, right? Because you want that gap to be larger. So you want it to be viewed as a true eviction in the courts as opposed to, uh, a foreclosure process. But I'm going to say nope, because going back to what you said is there has to be pain so they don't up and ghost you and leave the property, right? So if you're thinking about taking 3 to 5% down, then maybe you do a lease with an option to purchase, as opposed, and then it's option money, as opposed to an agreement for deed. You can do whatever you want, like you can structure it however you want, but just from our experience, like it seems we kind of just keep those guidelines in there. And so when we start getting to 20%, so they've been paying, let's say they've been paying for 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever before they default, they stop paying you. Well, now they've built up more interest. So now if we're approaching that 20%, it's always good to get your attorney, your good real estate attorney that you have on your team, right?
a litigator, by the
Now,
way.
and don't, for the love of all that is holy, don't go to Facebook on some goddamn ignorant group people and say, hey, what are your real estate attorney recommendations? Because I've got this massive problem right now. Have the real estate attorney on your team prior to you doing the agreement for deed so, so that you know who to go to and you don't have those issues,
Yeah, it's a good
right?
idea.
So,
Yeah, I don't know. I have my, definitely have my thoughts about attorneys, but a good real estate attorney, someone who's willing to actually, get in there and fight for you is. I mean, it's funny, this recent situation. I took a recommendation from you, who, and I, it turns out that I've worked with her in the past. So, but yeah, a really good, and I'll tell you what, this woman is. I always label her as a bulldog.
Yeah,
You do not
doesn't
want to
mess
get
around.
with this woman.
Yes, you need that person on your team because as we'll get to later, at a certain point in time, you've got to be like, okay, I have to hand this off to the attorney and be done with it, especially in a foreclosure. Like you need to hand that off to the attorney to deal with the foreclosure process for you in a true wrap, right?
Yeah,
Note wrap. If you're note wrap, you have to hand that off. So you have to have that person on your team. And you don't want to seek these people out when you need something done in a week.
yeah,
That's when you're going to get. That's when you're going to be worse off than you were before.
yeah, yeah. And I will say, as far as agreement for deed is concerned, there is a little bit of a kind of a catch with that because it falls into a gray area. You've got it's treated as an eviction, but you have eviction attorneys, attorneys that deal directly with only evictions. So you might have a little bit of trouble finding someone who's willing to deal with an agreement for deed scenario. But they're out there. They're definitely out there.
Yep.
It's a little bit of research, a little bit of a little bit of vetting, and you'll find one. They're not that hard to find, but just understand there is a difference between an eviction attorney and a real, like a real estate. How do I want to label it? Like
Yeah, like a
contract.
general real estate attorney.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
yeah.
more of a special. It's like a niche specialization. And a lot of real estate attorneys will say, "Oh yeah, well I can handle an eviction and a foreclosure." Immediately ask, "How many have you done in the last 12 months?"
Well, the good thing though is that in some cases, in fact, this is the case with the attorney that I was just talking about. They have partners that deal in those other specialty areas, so
Yep.
it's really easy to find that person. But agreement for deed, just kind of rehash it a little bit. You're more than likely, if you don't if your buyer does not have a significant amount of equitable interest in that property, and we're going to say 20% is probably the general rule of thumb. um, Although it's not, I'm sure there are states out there that actually have it, like you said, that Illinois has actual statute. Missouri does not have a statute. Our state does not have a statute, but they follow these kind of guidelines, and it's determined on an individual basis.
Yes.
And
It.
so if your buyer does have a significant amount of equitable ownership, meaning they've got actual cash into that deal, that a judge could very well just say, no, this is a this is a they own quite a bit in this. This probably needs to go through a foreclosure, just like uh, a legal foreclosure would occur. And so um,
Can,
if it
can
gets
I just interject there too, especially with the agreement for deed? Because what you said, I think in the gray area for a lot of states, like because you're building ownership interest, but you don't really have ownership interest until it's deeded to you, and so it's kind of this gray area. And a lot of real estate attorneys will tell you don't do that because it's in a gray area. But but we'll say just have a good agreement for deed.
yeah, have a quality.
Just have a good document, have good clauses in there, have it be clear about what the situation is inside the agreement for deed. And that will help the judge determine exactly how to go about processing it,
Yeah,
right? As
yeah,
an eviction, right?
yeah.
As opposed to the foreclosure. And sometimes, like we said, they're at 20% interest. They're going to say, hey, they have a lot of equity in this property, like we need to foreclose it. Like that may trigger some, but make sure that your agreements, the documents are like my see how I smiled. The documents are in good standing. That will help you more than anything with the judge.
That's true. Yeah, well written documents are key for this, particularly for this. If you're conveying any kind of ownership at all, I mean, it's just got to be top notch documents.
Yep. So can I say that the other thing too, just because we're Sorry, I'm jumping a little bit all over the place with the with our bullet point list in there. But I just want to add in there too, make the default process clear, regardless of whether it's in an agreement for deed or whether it's in your note, your deed of trust, your wrap mortgage. Make sure that it's clear. And for the love of all that is holy, follow it to the letter. Don't miss something. Don't let it go another month than it was supposed to.
That's true.
Follow it.
Yeah.
That's also what the judge wants to see.
Yeah.
Now, of course, sometimes you could be more lenient, like sometimes judges, as we know, like to be lenient with tenants and all of that stuff too. That might be okay, but don't miss a deadline. If you're supposed to be doing something in the default process and you started it, don't miss it.
Yeah.
Do not miss a deadline. Do not miss sending a letter. We call it the demand letter, right? Don't miss sending any of that. Make sure you follow your own process. It's your process. It's your document. Make sure you follow it.
Well, not only that, in some cases, many cases, in fact, a judge would take into may take into consideration. I'm going to say would, but may take into consideration your leniency.
Yes.
In that this default is not hurting you that much, so why not just give it one more college try?
Right. Yep.
And so, so yeah, it's very good. It's good advice to stick to your process and stick to your
It's funny you mentioned that. You're talking about over in Illinois, we had to deal with the agreement for deed over there too, and the judge basically told our attorneys, like, you guys need to figure out a scenario and make this work. Like, stop wasting my time and figure it out. So yeah, one more college try, like you said.
And we gave it the college try, and
that's right.
Same result.
Yep.
The good thing about that one was, and this was treated like an eviction. Truly,
it was. Ultimately, it was. That's correct.
Yeah, yes. In that they, the person got put on a payment plan, and it's when they get put on a payment plan like that. If the very first, if they're a penny short on their payment plan, your eviction goes to the top of the list, and they are immediately. Within a week, they are. I won't say that they're out, but they will have an order really quick, really quick to get out of the property. So
it was issued 24 hours later.
Yeah.
By the way,
I didn't know what time it was, so I padded it a little bit with 6 more days.
Yeah.
But, so yeah. All right, let's we're already 28 minutes into this. Let's talk
about we've actually hit a lot of our bullet points, even though not in a particular order that might make sense to people, but we have hit them.
I honestly haven't looked at the bullet points because that's just kind of a guide for me, but I do want to get into the legal side of it. And that is an actual legal proceeding, a foreclosure proceeding. And I don't know how deep you want to go with this, but it's a fairly simple process. But the problem with a legal foreclosure is that it's very expensive. I'm not even going to give you numbers, but I will tell you the one that we filed here very recently, just to file it alone was $5,000.
Yeah,
and that would be something that that fee is there regardless of whether it's contested or not.
Not right.
It doesn't matter. That money is gone, and so that could quickly add up. $5,000 is quite a bit for foreclosure, and this is yet another reason why your down payments that you take off of these off of these seller finance deals need to be significant, because ultimately, I hate to put it like this, but it's true. They ultimately pay for their own foreclosure.
Yeah, should be. It
should be, but I just don't like that wording. That's all. So generally, the process with a legal foreclosure is, at least here in Missouri, we have once you file, you have a curing period. You have a period of, here in Missouri, it's 30 days. It's going to be different in other states, but. And we're also a non-judicial foreclosure state. This is certainly going to be different in the judicial foreclosure states, because courts are just
It
super.
takes months.
They're they're
Yes.
they're it's government, so that's what you should expect. Uh,
Nothing. Yes, that's correct. Yes. Corruption and nothing. That's correct.
um, so in art, we have a curing period of 30 days here, and then once that curing period has passed, at that point you can actually send that foreclosure. Foreclosure then becomes activated. It starts making its way through the courts, and it's actually recorded. And this is where you would see, if you were looking on Zillow, um, they might be referred out to a trustee that might be managing the foreclosures. That's very, very common. All the big lenders do it. They will refer out to a foreclosure trustee. So uh, you'll see in the recordings. Man, I'm zoning on what it's called. So you would see it's not a transfer. It's a assignment of a uh,
No.
assignment of trustee. So what they're doing is, if we live in a deed of trust state, so we have a trustee on that deed of trust. Well, that trustee would then, uh, I don't want to say remove him or herself, but that trustee would then transfer their powers over to a foreclosing attorney or a foreclosing law firm, and that is an assignment of trustee. So now we're in the courts. Now we're going through the process. We're eventually going to get to the point, and by the way, this applies to us as if we have a mortgage rep. It applies to a lender, a bank. It applies to anybody. That individual who owes that money, um, on that loan. Oh, I don't like to call it a loan. I like to call it extending credit in our situation, because we're not actually. It's just a little technical term. But whoever they're gonna they have the op or not they have the option of paying that off up until all the way up until that auction date, because what's going to happen is you're going to go through these steps, and you're going to have an auction date set that's going to be approved. It's going to be set, and at that point, um, the property, there's a couple options that you can do, or a couple options that you have as the foreclosing body on that, the individual, the foreclosing entity on that property. And you can essentially, just like banks do, we've all seen REO properties, right? Bank owned homes. You can actually purchase that property. The bank can purchase the property for what they owe, or what's owed on that property. They can then take that property and resell it. That's one option that you have. Another option is going to be that you can sell it publicly. You can sell that property publicly at an auction to the highest bidder. The highest bidder generally is you're going to be required to pay cash for that deal, right there on the spot when you pick it up on the courthouse steps. Um, the benefit to a bank owning a property is that they can purchase the property for what is owed. They can resell it, and they get to keep whatever proceeds they earn off of that sale. So once they're made whole, anything over and above that, they get to keep that. If it goes to auction, anything, any amounts that are collected over and above what that property went to the highest bidder for, by law, has to go back to any overages has to go back to the previous owner, the legal owner of that property. A lot of people don't realize that when you foreclose on a property, but that is actually what happens. And there's an entire industry out there that's dedicated to finding these folks and recovering money for them that that they just thought they lost. The buyers just thought they lost that money. Oh, I didn't pay on it. Well, the bank took it, and I just forfeited all that money. But there's an entire little economy that runs on those overages and getting people what they're due. So,
And nobody reaches out to that previous
ooh,
seller. That's on them to figure that out too. And of course, if you're walking away from a foreclosure, like you said, like we've mentioned this before, like you're not really interested in looking up a wound, right? Especially a new wound
yeah,
from your financial history. So
yeah,
there is a lot of money out there for, because on the courthouse steps, let let's say it's a $300,000 property. There's only 100,000 owed. Probably wouldn't stop payment in that case too. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, there's 100,000 owed. Well, somebody pays 200,000 on the courthouse steps for it. Well, there's $100,000 overage there that is due to somebody.
yeah.
Only if you claim it.
That's right. You have to claim it.
Yeah.
And I know there's I know there's a time limit. There's like a statute of limitations on.
Yeah, 12 months here in Missouri, I think.
Is it 12 months?
Yeah, I think it's 12. Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting. And so, you might ask, well, why wouldn't a lender just buy the property and resell it for more? But a lot of these lenders if they have a ton of foreclosures, they don't have the bandwidth to be able to manage it, because guess what? When the bank owns the property, now they're responsible for all the taxes. They're responsible for the upkeep on the property. A lot of banks just don't want to deal with that. But people with portfolios, kind of our size, it's probably more beneficial to go ahead and you know buy the property and resell it, or forgive the. You're essentially just forgiving the credit that you extended on it in exchange for the deed to the property. Then you can turn around and resell that property, and you get to keep any of those overages because you're the legal title holder and you sold it. So anyway, wow, that's a mouthful.
Well, that's the whole legal thing. So remember, let's go back to the beginning of all this. You want to avoid getting in that position from these.
Yeah.
So you want to communicate with your buyer, right? Your borrower, right? You want to communicate with them and see if you can work it out. Because remember, this is important. Whether it's an agreement for deed or whether it's a promissory note that you secure with a deed of trust, or an all-inclusive deed of trust, if there's a sub-2, right? If there's an underlying mortgage, right? You have the ability as the lender to modify any terms you see fit at any time, period, bar none. The banks make you qualify and go through a loan modification process and blah, blah, blah. You, as the note holder, can modify said note at any point in time that you want. Just make sure you do it in writing. Make sure you do it in writing so you don't have issues later too. But that's the first step, as we mentioned, is to see if you can work it out. Right?
Yeah.
Work it out may mean modifying your own note, which you have the full authority and capability to do at any point. Okay, so keep that in mind. But if that doesn't work out, right? If that doesn't work out, then you may have to evict them under an agreement for deed. You may have to foreclose under a wrap, right? A wrap note. Just depends. You have to be ready for those things, right? That's what we're trying to stress. You have to be ready for those things in a worst case scenario. And also too, we say this a lot in different podcasts, and in our calculator, we talk about this, building in the reserves. Well, that's why that reserve feature is built into our sub-2 calculator. Right? It's just for situations like this, the worst case situation. So if you built in some reserves and you have money sitting there, you can weather 3 months of no payments from an individual property with no issue while you're working out a new arrangement with your end buyer.
Yep.
So,
yeah. I do want to talk a little bit, though. I know we've got a little bit of time left. I do want to talk about some alternative methods to either one of these scenarios.
Yep.
And the first one is just kind of old school, classic cash for keys.
Yes.
There is nothing on earth that's preventing you, even though this is now you're going to have to take back. You have legal ownership if you're following this model anyway, but you can offer cash for keys on an agreement for deed to rip that agreement up. No problem.
Make it null and void. Correct.
Totally release them from that obligation. You get the property back. Hopefully, it's in good shape. Same is true for a note. Like you just said, you can modify the terms of a note at
Yep,
any time.
100%.
And if you want to throw in there, hey, we'll give you $5,000 to leave the property so you can get moved in somewhere else. Now, assuming that the property's in good shape, you're not going to have to dump a bunch of money into it or anything like that. That might be your best option versus a
Yep.
foreclosure. You don't have all that time you have to wait. You don't have to all the different communications and dealing with the courts and all that stuff. Cash for keys would be a fantastic way to be able to
Yep.
get those properties back if you have to.
And remember, like you said, if you get the 10% down, say it's a $200,000 property, so you get $20,000 down on the down payment, on the 10% rule, then paying them $5,000 back to leave the property in generally good condition, not to leave the property in a state of complete shit disrepair, right? That's what you're doing. So, and remember, like you said, your foreclosure is going to cost you about 3 times as an eviction. So it's like $5,000 to $10,000 depending on what state you're in. And if you're in a judicial state, it might be 2 or 3 times that,
Yeah.
especially as long as it might take.
Well, that's
Right?
all holding costs there. I mean,
Oh God, yes. So it's to your benefit to cut a check for $5,000 to help them move on to the next thing, and then you have that in writing, making your previous arrangement null and void, releasing them from all obligations and making all those null and void because they met these conditions in exchange for $5,000 of consideration.
that's right.
So,
In some cases, it could be totally worth it to just offer that.
100%. Yep.
The other thing we want to talk about just a little bit is deed in lieu of foreclosure. Um, some might argue that this is kind of silly for a buyer to do. Now, this is only on legal title. This is only if you're
Yep.
wrapping it, if you're offering a wrap, and but deed in lieu of foreclosure could be another easy. It's a low cost way certainly of getting a property back, but it requires that you have an agreement with your buyer that that they're willing to do that. The thing about it is a deed in lieu of foreclosure is a legal proceeding as well. It's a legally recorded document. It's way cheaper because you don't have to go through the court system. But deed in lieu of foreclosure is definitely an option for you. A low cost, relatively quick process. In fact, I think I've never had to do one, but from what I understand from folks that I've talked to, it still needs an approval. It still needs to hit the courts, but it's basically rubber stamp. Do I have that correct?
Um, I think you could just record it and do, but if you started the process right with the courts, then yes, it would be a rubber stamp.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would
you-
make sense then. Yeah, that would make sense if you already started foreclosure and then
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, wouldn't see why. Again, not an attorney here, but I wouldn't see why you just couldn't record that, get the keys, and move on with your life.
Yes, you can record it, and a lot of hard money, not a lot. Some hard money lenders will make you, especially if it's your first time working with them or you're a new real estate investor, they'll actually make you sign a deed in lieu of foreclosure up front with the document package that they will record if you default
Yeah.
on there. Now, I might say that some judges might not look favorably upon that because that might have been signed under duress in order to get the money to close the deal. But it does happen, and then all you do is record it. Now, if the person is still staying in the house, right, then you have to get them out, right? You may have to have the sheriff come and forcibly remove them, right? So you still may have to have a court action in order to get that order to get them out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So many. What a tangled web.
Yes, but we say, I guess the point of all this too is like we do this stuff all the time, so we don't really think about say this will scare some people away. It's like, oh well, I don't want to be a lender. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to worry about that. But remember, take a step back and think about this for a second. When you're seller financing properties, regardless of whether it's agreement for deed or whether you're wrapping them, too, you are the bank. Do you see banks turning down loans on properties because they might have to foreclose, then you shouldn't either.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think recent conversation with the wife, um, we talk about collateral. Obviously, we know what the collateral is in this situation, and so it would be it would be silly it would be silly to get into a deal where what is being collateralized, your property, is it wouldn't be um, worth taking back. So I guess what I'm saying is make sure you have enough, at least an insurance, a little bit of equity in that deal, so that you have insurance. Because you're gonna, if you have to turn around and sell that property and you have to put it on the MLS, you're gonna have all kinds of, you're gonna have all kinds of realtor fees and closing costs and all this good stuff. So, but whether it's lending, whether it's extending credit, it's a kind of a crude way to say it, but it is all about the collateral. It is the security in the deal, and if you have good security in the deal, and hopefully you do if you're seller financing your own properties, um, then you're fairly safe. This is the kind of one of the good things about real estate. This is why real estate is the preferred instrument for investment, because you have real hard assets that you can collateralize, where paper stocks are it's just thin air. There's nothing backing it at all. So
And,
that go ahead.
and the other key thing too, which we neglected to say, is you still, when you're the bank and you're creating these notes or the agreements for deeds or the loan arrangement inside your agreement for deed, we'll say, right? We still have to vet and underwrite the buyer. So if you did that properly and you had a good buyer and they default, in other words, they're missing a payment, they're late on a payment, chances are that'll be a temporary situation if you did your underwriting properly.
Yeah.
So hopefully you won't have to get into that situation. But shit happens. Like maybe it was a husband and wife and they're getting a divorce. Well, now you just figure out, okay, you guys need to figure out how to go on your separate ways. Let's get the property back. What can we do to make that happen? Totally understand. Yeah.
And that's
So
the really really cool thing about this is you have, being the bank and being in control, really in control of you're a note lord essentially. The really cool thing is you don't have to, while it's recommended that you follow, like what you said before, you follow your procedures, you follow what's written, but you have a lot of wiggle room where, if you called up a bank, if your buyer called up a bank and they had a loan with a bank, and they said, hey, I'm having problems. Well, they might do a loan modification for them once. They might do, they might help them out. But even the loan modifications are very, very strictly written and adhered to. I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't adhere to your own directives in your contracts. What I'm saying is, as the bank, you get to be, um, or you have the option, rather, I should say, of determining what steps you're going to take, what level you're going to take things to. Um, it's no different than with tenants. Tenants. We've got a couple tenants, right? We got one tenant that's like 20 grand behind right now. This is on one of those um, rental properties. She lost her job. She actually lost two jobs. She was a paralegal. She lost two jobs, and she got really, just really far behind. Well, we've got her on a payment plan, and no different than what I would do with, say, someone I've extended credit to. But we've got her on a payment plan. We have that flexibility to be able to do that. Now we have paper backing it. We have the legal side backing it, legal documents. Um, but we don't have to be. Um, we just have wiggle room. Let's just leave it at that.
yeah.
We have leeway. Uh, so that's one more. I guess that's one more reason that some of these buyers are attracted to seller finance so much. Is you know I don't know, maybe some of them are being, uh, I don't want to, predatory is not the word I'm looking for, but some of them simply can't get financed, um, and then some of them might be looking kind of like how, have you ever seen the scams that go on with rentals where people are looking just for private landlords? Only
Yep.
private landlords are not going to
Yep.
go to so you do have those kind of folks out there. So I guess what I'm saying is, or repeating basically what you said, and that is make sure you're vetting these people really well. And we can get into maybe someday later. Uh, we can get into Dodd Frank a little bit,
Oh yeah.
because this.
Well, yeah, maybe we can actually talk about our underwriting criteria that we established for our fund and all that stuff too. There's all kinds
Yeah,
of
yeah, we could
fun
do.
and exciting things we could do. That's right.
But yeah, well, I mean, Dodd Frank only. Well, I'm not going to get into it, but essentially, for our fund, Dodd Frank is not really relevant because we're lending to the.
Correct. Yes, we are outside of the purview of.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we established it like we did. Yes.
However, though, if you are extending credit to someone, you do fall under Dodd Frank in some way, shape, or form, and we can talk about that on another podcast. But uh, for all intents and purposes today, let's just leave it at this. Let's call it. It's 51 minutes into this thing, and I'm
Yeah,
getting
there you go again. I know.
woozy, man. I'm getting woozy. All right.
So it's all good. So have a great week. We'll be back at it next week. And as always, saw the QR code. Hit us up, partner with us. We are here to help. We do all this stuff pretty much all the time, all day, every day.
That's right. All right, guys.